Hey, what's up everybody? Manga Mike here, and we're back with another video. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about the 10 components of action scenes. And we're going to be using Ed versus Greed in the manga as the example. Let's get started. Alrighty, everybody. So before we get into all the points, I want to make a quick distinction between two different kinds of action scenes. So there's an action scene that is purely for entertainment almost, but it's also purely to show like the strength of either a protagonist or an antagonist, whether that's main or side. That's not what we're going to be talking about. Those scenes usually consist of people like beating the crap out of like, 5, 6, 20, 30 people, and it's just to show the power of those characters. And then there's a different kind of action scene, and that's the one we're going to be talking about in this video. That kind of action scene is there's a huge conflict between two characters. It can be two protagonists, two antagonists, a protagonist and antagonist, doesn't matter. And this conflict has to like come to a resolution of some sort, and at this point talking doesn't work anymore. We have to now use our fists or our guns or what have you. So now that we have clarified that, I want to go into the 10 points that I have kind of found within my studies, and the first one being the build-up. So the build-up is everything that leads into a conflict. So in this case, it's Ed figuring out that Alphonse has been taken by Greed. He now has to come and rescue Alphonse by sheer force, right? That's the build-up. The build-up is also a bit of dialogue, or it can be a bit of dialogue between the two. And it's kind of like, if you think of like the 10 Dual Commandments, like you're trying, in Hamilton, if you've seen that, but you're trying to come to a resolution before we have to fight to the death, basically. And that doesn't work, and now we go to point 2. The proof of competence. So this is kind of like an optional one. This is almost like the first action scene that I was talking about. It's showing that your character, or whether it be the antagonist, protagonist, what have you, they are competent enough to have a fight with the person that is kind of in charge of what the situation is. So in this case, like Greed would be the kind of person I would say is in charge of this particular situation. He has the power, right? And basically what happens in this scene is a lackey's sent off at Ed, and Ed one-shots him, right? And that's kind of all you need to have this like proof of competence. And at the bottom of the screen, the bottom left-hand panel, you see that Greed is acknowledging that, oh, he might actually be a somewhat formidable foe. I might have to take care of this myself. So then this leads into the third point. There has to be a part in which the stakes get raised, or it doesn't have to be, but it's a good idea to maybe do something to raise the stakes, right? So in this case, it's Alphonse is being taken away, and we're going to just figure this out ourselves, because obviously this person doesn't want to deal with us the way that we want to deal, and now we have to take this person by force and get what we need to get. For instance, this could be seen as like Vegeta offering to Goku when they fought in the Sand Saga, offering to Goku to join him, right? That's kind of raising the stakes in an emotional way, because Goku now has to make this choice of whether he's going to stick to his morals, or side with Vegeta and not stick with his morals. Now, obviously, he's going to stick to his morals, but that raises the stakes, because it shows that this antagonist, they can't be bargained with, right? And then there's also a raising of the stakes that shows the severity of how difficult this task is going to be, right? This isn't a major reveal, but it's a reveal nonetheless. It's going to make it seem like the person, like your protagonist, is going to be at a disadvantage of some sort, and that's what's being shown here. So this is something that you want to do in order to kind of promote the emotion and promote some of the intensity within your action scene. Point number 4, action-based dialogue. So this is your protagonist trying to figure out how to combat the first hurdle that was thrown at them, right? So in this case, it's Ed now has to try to figure out a way around this kind of armor, and he kind of figures out, let me check something here. Yeah, he kind of figures out like, well, maybe if I hit him where his armor isn't unexpectedly, maybe that will cause a little bit of damage, and he was kind of right. Only to immediately get a rebuttal from the antagonist in this particular circumstance. This doesn't have to happen every time, but it's pretty immediate, right? He slashes at Ed like right after his head seemingly is cracked open on the ground. And then this leads us directly into the next point. As you can see, like even talking about this, I'm almost out of breath talking about all that just happened in this action scene, right? This first portion of action scene. And that's a good way of understanding yourself as you're reading through. Okay, I need to take a break. Like if you're not able to explain this out loud without like feeling like you can catch your breath, that's probably a good point in which you need to take a break, have a little bit of dialogue between the two characters that are fighting or the two groups of people that are fighting, and kind of explain what just happened. Allow the audience to kind of understand the information you just threw at them, right? And in this case, Greed is explaining what just happened, right? And this is also another chance for the antagonist to provide an offer, like or the protagonist, antagonist, whoever, to provide an offer, right? You know, if you just stop now and tell me what I need to know, I don't have to kill you, right? Or we don't have to do this. And this is kind of what you get in this circumstance as well. And then this leads us to this next point. Okay, you don't agree. Now there's a reveal. Let me show you my true power, right? And in this case, again, the artwork in this is very similar to the Bleach artwork that I talked about in a previous video. But you want to frame this as an insurmountable task for your either the antagonist or protagonist. It doesn't really matter. But you want to show it as something that might not work out, right? This is going to be really hard. And now you have an opportunity, because this is actually towards the end of the chapter, you have an opportunity to do something new, which is create a huge break. Go to the back at the barn, leave it at a cliffhanger. So now your audience is like, oh, dang it, like what the heck's going on? I want to know what happens, and it's going to cause them to flip through. And that's not to say don't put filler information, right? This is an important back at the barn kind of situation. We want to know what's happening with Alphonse, and stuff is starting to gear up in a different way outside of this fight that's occurring, right? And that stuff that's outside of this fight that's occurring between Ed and Greed is actually really important for the Ed and Greed fight, and you'll see that in a little bit. So give your readers, again, a chance to, one, kind of digest the information you just gave them in the reveal, but also give them a break from one form of action. If it's starting to get to like 20 pages or like even 10 to 15 pages, you kind of need a break. Like that's a lot of like action just between two characters. Unless it's like your big bad at the end, right? That's different. So this leads us to the next point. Once you come back from the back at the barn, now you have an opportunity to show the low point. Or you could have even shown the low point before the back at the barn. It doesn't really matter the order, but you need to have a low point within your action scenes, whether it's for the antagonist or the protagonist. In this case, this is the low point for Ed, right? It seems like, his freaking blood of his head is smeared up against the wall. He's literally like panting and spitting up blood. He's trembling, just trying to get up. And, the antagonist, Greed, is just in the background, like, kind of nonchalantly walking up and smiling a little bit, like nothing has happened, right? And now we get to the next point, the hope, right? After it seems like it's insurmountable for your character, and it seems like all is lost, and they're kind of like, the field has been laid waste to, and he or she or they are just totally, like, immobilized. Now we give a chance of hope, right? This could be in the form of a possible technique that they've been like holding out on. It could be in the form of an interruption by another character. It could be the entrance of another character. It doesn't really matter, but hope is important in this particular scenario because it provides a slight plot twist in this action scene, right? And that's what you want. You want this action scene to feel a little bit like a roller coaster of emotions, and this is a good way to do it. You have a low point, you have the hope, then you have this next point, which is an interruption or the end of the conflict, right? So another way to kind of prolong, if you want to prolong this particular circumstance, you have then another rebuttal by the antagonist or whoever, right? So a rebuttal in this possible scenario could have been like maybe Greed slashes Ed's other arm and he's unable to clap to perform alchemy quickly, right? That could have been a rebuttal, and now Ed has to figure out another way in order to kind of fix this circumstance, right? But in this case, there's an interruption. So the back at the barn scene that I was talking about actually spilled over into this particular scene, and it interrupted it, right? This is a good way if you want this conflict to go on in a later chapter. This is how you would do it. You would interrupt it in some way by some other side plot that's been going on. So yeah, those are my 10 different components of action scenes, with the kind of added 11th one of a rebuttal, right? Once you do a rebuttal, if you're not ready to end your action scene, you would then go back through some of the other points in order to give your new, it's almost like a new cycle of action scene, a little bit more flavor and a little bit of intensity, right? So I really do hope that this was super helpful. I'm actually learning a lot doing this series, so I really appreciate y'all like supporting me in the series and everything like that. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to kind of present this. But I hope that this has been helpful, and I'm Manga Mike, and I'm out.